So the Aune AR9000 came out recently. I put together a review of that one, but today I'm here with Cameron, who's also been listening to it for some time and has some thoughts. So in today's video, we're going to get his impressions and we're going to talk about it. So, Cameron.
Yeah.
What are your general thoughts of the Aune AR9000? First of all, are we saying it right? Is it Aune? Aune?
I think.
Do you have any idea how we're supposed to say this?
I'm pretty sure Aune is correct.
Yeah. What are your general thoughts? And then we'll get into some specifics.
Yeah. Generally, very positive. I think the main thing that might be a bit different for those that have tried it at CanJam's past, because it's been on the way for quite some time now, but now it is actually finally here. The build quality is a bit different and quite a bit improved, I would say. It is now much more of a metal construction, which I'm much more of a fan of, and I think kind of needs to be for a headphone of this price. The comfort overall is something which really surprised me. It's not a super lightweight headphone, but it's not heavy, and the way in which it fits overall, just even for my massive noggin, really, really works well. Pads are nice and plush, the headband distributes weight evenly. I think the only thing I don't like about the build itself is maybe the cable for some minor nitpicks. I like the way that it does the adaptive ends, so it comes with one cable, but you can swap the end out between Pentacon, single-ended, XLR, and that kind of thing. The XLR port, though, is completely round and doesn't have an indicator on the top, so half the time when I go and plug it in the amp, I'm trying to work out which way it's supposed to actually go in, and that's a bit of a faff. But in terms of the actual feeling of it, it's non-microphonic, it's nice and soft, I think it looks pretty good. And then the headphone itself is... What are your thoughts on the aesthetics of it? Because I think the build quality is actually really good. I do not know what I think about the aesthetics themselves.
It's interesting, at the various high-end shows over the years where we've seen this, I wasn't the biggest fan of the aesthetics. But as you say, getting it in now with the production unit, there's something about it that is actually much nicer looking to me than what I thought at the time when I was first trying it at those trade shows. Because they did make some changes there. I think specifically the grill piece. I could be wrong about that, but that's the thing that stands out to me as being slightly different. And it does look and feel quite a bit nicer than the AR5000. The other thing is that I noticed, because like I've taken a bunch of calls with this, like video calls and meetings with this on my head, and I noticed that like it looks so much less stupid than the majority of audiophile headphones that I usually wear for these kinds of meetings. Obviously, working in this industry, it's fine, right? But like it looks like a lot more normal, and I actually really appreciate that about it. Like especially from that angle. I did want to note that you mentioned there's some differences to do with the build. When they sent the production unit over to me, they also noted in their email that the sound is a bit different from the recent one that we heard at the Vienna show.
It is.
And I want to get your sense of like, is what you're hearing different as well?
So obviously I'm going from memory and comparing a show floor impression to the one that I've got here. So it's not the most reliable, but I would say yes. It's a little bit brighter in the kind of mid-treble region, as far as I can tell, like around 7-8-ish kilohertz, which I quite like. I think that that's quite good. And then it seems like the upper treble was taken down a bit, which I think is kind of what was needed. So it is a little bit different. I would say it's generally an improvement from what we heard before, though. So I am pretty happy with the changes that they've made.
Yeah, for me, I heard a bit of a lower treble peak somewhere. I don't know exactly where at the Vienna show. And then the production unit that I got, it's just not there at all. So, or at least not on my head. And so, when I was doing the tone generation at the Vienna show, that's what I noticed. And then now even when I measure it on my head, when I do tone gen, it's just not there. So headphones behave differently on different heads. So I'm curious how this is going to measure on your head, and maybe we can do a comparison of that in a moment. But yeah, is there anything else with regards to the build or the comfort or anything like that worth noting?
No, I think that they've just done a solid job. I think it looks good. It's just a bit of a busy design. I don't quite know what I think about it, but the actual feel and construction of everything is great. Comfort is great. And like you say, it's got the meeting suitable factor to it. It has not got some weird halos or bits, antennas sticking out or anything like that. And just using regular 3.5 connectors, thank God. So no, I think the build overall is done really good. The only slight nitpick I have, to be honest, is just the fact that I wish there was some kind of marking or indicator on top of the XLR connector. I might just Sharpie something on, to be honest, but that's about it.
Out of curiosity, what you're the DAC man and the amp man. What are you running this from?
Mostly my Sale HM1. I have also tried the Cayenne HA300 Mark II, which is a tube amp. Actually, this is one that I didn't quite like as much on tubes, for the simple reason that the bass profile on it is already really, really good, and I don't feel like it needs any help there.
Did you see the impedance curve for this headphone?
No, I've not. Where is the impedance peak?
It's extremely low.
Okay.
It's the bump in the bass is ridiculously low. Like it does boost, so there is going to be a little bit of change on high output impedance because this is not exactly a high impedance headphone, but like it's the kind of thing that will primarily just boost the sub bass. It's like the lowest that I've seen for a dynamic driver headphone, so it's kind of crazy in that regard.
I mean, yeah, it's one that I think a lot of people are going to like what it does on high output impedance amps or tube amps and stuff, because just boosting sub bass rather than just getting a mid bass boost like an HD800 or something is quite nice. It's just also not one where I feel it needs it anywhere near as much, because the bass profile on this headphone is one of the standout aspects of it. This thing slaps, and the bass profile is done in such a way where you don't get tons of bleed into the mid bass, so it sounds punchy and controlled rather than just being overly bassy with not much definition to it, if that makes sense. I think the bass and mids on this just work so well, track so well to an HRTF-like response, that is something which, I mean, there's just not many other headphones that do it as well as these.
There's none of that sort of blooming effect that you get from, more like mid bass and upper bass focused presentations while still being bassy, So that's what's cool about it. How's your sense of the rest of the sound?
Overall, again, really positive. This is one which I describe as kind of a darker neutral. It's not far off being neutral, but the main area of coloration in it, because the bass is slightly elevated and then the mids track really, really well. There's a bit of a 1 kilohertz thing going on, but not to any crazy extent, and it kind of helps make it sound more lively. The big area of coloration is the fact that the ear gain region is overall quite low, which I would much prefer that it is low than high. If it's high, then it just gets kind of aggressive and difficult to listen to on certain headphones, and honky and shouty depending on where exactly it's peaking. But on this one, it being quite low means that it's just a little bit more relaxed sounding-ish. But I don't want to call it a relaxed headphone, because it's not. The combination then of the bass that it's got and the excess upper treble, because the upper treble is a little bit lifted, makes it really, really punchy. But the overall presentation of vocals and things like that is just a little bit further back. It's not really pushing those front and center. But the timbre on these is really, really good. I find that just from a tonal perspective, it comes across very close to what I would want. The only real exception being that area. Again, the ear gain just wanting to be a little bit higher. But I don't feel like I need to EQ it. Do you run these with EQ? So
the only thing I EQ with this is occasionally I boost that sort of lower treble region up a little bit, because there's a bit of a dip there on my head. And I think there is actually on the measurement systems as well for that region. I feel it's closer to 4 kilohertz though. So it is a little bit closer to that relaxed subdued ear gain region. And so, if somebody is listening to good recordings, I can see wanting a bit more energy there. And that is where, the area that I would boost up a bit. I find it's like a balancing act, right? Between clarity and muffled. And you want to be in the right sort of sweet zone for that. And I find this one is as you said, it's on the relaxed end, but it's still within the sweet zone personally.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because I like headphones which have a slightly lower ear gain region. I mean, things like the Mudhouse Tungsten, for example, the Perio GSE does a similar kind of thing. And if I had a choice of being too high or too low, absolutely too low, because too low, it's a little bit more relaxed, whereas too high, it's I need to turn this down. This is uncomfortable to listen to. I don't need to EQ it though. I was listening to this for ages just without changing anything, didn't feel a need to. And that's really cool, because there's not many headphones where I actually feel like I'm getting a great experience without at least tweaking something. I mean, on the D1, for me, for example, I actually had the opposite problem where the ear gain region was just too high on my head. There was just a bit too much, and I kind of had to EQ it down in order to listen to it comfortably. These, it's a case of, if I'm listening to Adam Baldish or something, I'll turn it up. But for most listening, I don't need to, and it still sounds excellent without changing anything.
Anything standing out for you in the treble?
So I get a little bit of a sort of 6-ish kilohertz peak on one side in particular. But I should also note that that's pretty common for me on the same side. In fact, I can probably throw up some measurements of the Sennheiser HD800S and the Positional Audio Composer, where I get stuff in exactly the same spot. So it's hard to know how much of that is this headphone and how much of that is just headphones on my head generally, because a lot of headphones do that for me. And because I'm so used to it, it's not really as much of an objection. So I would turn that down personally, but I again don't really feel like I have to, and I don't think it's necessarily as on the headphone as the graph might make it look, because if you look at other headphones on my head, a lot of them do exactly the same thing on the same side. The upper treble in particular tracks really closely to where I would want it. It's not overly excessive. It's not overly, it's not got any massive peaks or dips. It's just got the usual kind of bumpiness, but hovering around the right overall level. And again, I don't feel like I need to adjust that pretty much at all. It's just right where I would want it to be. The combination of the slightly lifted upper treble with the bass just makes it really dynamic and engaging to listen to. I've really, really enjoyed it for a lot of electronic genres, anything percussion heavy. The treble is just overall done really well. There's so much about this headphone which I've just found myself smiling listening to.
Is there anything that stands out? So like I'm thinking of for Griffin, he said many similar things that you did, but the 10 kilohertz emphasis for him is it stands out. Is there any of that, any sort of peaking or anything that would be sort of a thing to flag for you?
So it's probably best if we just put my on-head measurements on screen at the moment. So this is how the headphone is behaving on my head, compensated to my diffuse field HRTF. And again, you can see that the bass and mids, generally speaking, track extremely closely to an HRTF response, which is fantastic. The 1 kilohertz area is a bit elevated. I don't really mind that so much, because as long as it's not incredibly drastic, I generally find that it makes things sound a little bit more lively. It can impact vocal timbre a bit, so whether or not I'd feel a desire to EQ that down honestly depends on what I'm listening to. But I actually do prefer a very slight lift there compared to just being flat. The 10 kilohertz area you mentioned, I don't get a peak at 10 kilohertz. I get two on my right ear, one at 6 kilohertz, which is very normal for me on headphones, and then another one at, I think that's about 13 or so kilohertz? No, 14. So that one, it does show up on certain things. If I'm listening to stuff which just a cymbal is hitting exactly in that spot or something, it's noticeable. But in most listening, I don't tend to notice it all that much, because it's very high in frequency, it's very narrow, not much stuff actually seems to encounter that as a problem. And on my left ear, it actually tracks really quite well just towards the HRTFE response. I get my normal ear canal dip around 9 kilohertz or so, but other than that, it's just kind of hovering and bouncing a little bit around the line. So no, the upper treble on my head works really well, and quite a bit better than headphones like the HD800S, for instance. Comparing it to something, because this is a flagship headphone, but at the same time, quite a bit cheaper than a lot of other flagship headphones like a Hyperman Sesvara or something. I think the overall treble profile above about 5 kilohertz fits me better on this than something like a Sesvara. But then the fact that the ear gain region, the 4 kilohertz in particular, is just that steep dip, kind of takes it away from being perceived as technical as something as a Sesvara. If I put the Sesvara on, it sounds more detailed to me. It sounds a bit more spacious and airy. But then this is generally more enjoyable to listen to, even though it doesn't sound as quote-unquote high performance. But this is also a lot easier to fix, like just one band around 4 kilohertz, bumping that up a bit. And then if I want to take down the peak around 6 kilohertz on one ear, which I also get on the Sesvara, same thing, I can do so. So I feel like out of the box, I slightly prefer the Sesvara, with the exception that the bass on it is just not as good. This is just straight up better in that regard. But this, I'm able to get to a higher level of performance much, much easier. There's two things about it which are, I'd say, drawbacks in my experience, though. Whilst the resonant frequency being so incredibly low, and therefore leakage on this just not being a problem, you don't really have any issues with seal anyway, because the comfort, the swivel, and the way that the pads actually sit, they're nice kind of angled pads, and they're pretty plush and soft, means I just get a great seal no matter what. In fact, again, look on my on-head measurements, they're tracking almost identically to each other as well. The positional variation is somewhat significant. Is that something that you've experienced as well?
So when I was looking at this, it made me think, yeah, like I just finished reviewing the Grell OAE2, which like takes that idea to like the extreme, right? By putting it like super far in front. And so I was thinking about this when I saw the angle drivers. So I did a little bit of testing with that where I moved the headphone forward and did a sweep on my head and then moved it back. And sure enough, yeah, there are definitely some differences there. So I'd expect that there's also going to be some, behavior differences on different heads. And we see that when comparing the rig data versus the headphone.
Or in fact, the data of your on-head measurements to mine.
We should show that as well. But mainly my message to anybody who is looking at the graphs of any headphones is that we shouldn't be thinking about this as, this is how this headphone's going to perform, any headphone's going to perform, for the average person, just that this is how this headphone could perform for any given individual. Think about the measurement rigs as like an individual head and ears, and we all have different heads and ears, right? And so the fact that there's a bit of difference there between myself and the measurement rig, and I imagine between you and the measurement rigs as well, it's a good reminder of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why big part of the reason as to why we embarked on doing this in the first place, showing how stuff is actually behaving for us, not just here's what it does on the 5128, and then here's how it sounds little like that on my head, and I'll try and explain that to you. We can actually just show you now, which is great.
Yeah, but also this type of design, I think, is going to lend itself a little bit more to that kind of variability, especially in those bands where we see this kind of difference between ourselves and industry standard test fixtures. I think the OAE1 is, or OAE2 is like more drastic for that. The one thing I wanted to say about this though is that there's really, as much as I can position it more forward on my head and get a slightly different result than if I position it back on my head, I don't think I would really wear it in either of those positions. Like, I feel like, let me know if you agree or disagree with this, but like, I feel like when I wear this on my head, there's just like one default position that it's like meant to fit in and meant to sit in. And, how the driver sits in relation to the ear based on that is just sort of how it is. And that may result in more variability across different people, because I don't think people are going to be buying the headphone and then wearing it in one of these like weird, like super forward or super back positions. Even though you could, theoretically, it's just, I feel like there's just this more default average position that it fits in to make it most comfortable. And that just happens to work out great on my head.
No, I'm the same. I mean, the measurements there, that is an average of the different positions that I would reasonably wear it in, but there is just that one position which, when I put it on and just get it so that it's feeling comfy, I just settle into every time. So it's not so much that I think the positional variation is an issue for me or any individual listeners listening, because as you say, it's actually ends up pretty consistent in terms of how you put it on your head. The problem is just that it might mean that it's going to be a bit more variable from person to person, but the fact that we have gotten some variation, but they've all ended up in responses that are still damn great, is pretty great in and of itself. I'd be more concerned if there was, some massive peak that was showing up for some people and not others or something like that. But you're really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying this. The 5128, it can't speak, but it's got a nice looking squig on it. I don't think it's too much of a worry. It's just something I noticed.
Do you have any, you mentioned some of the music that you listened to that you were liking with it, and you also mentioned Adam Baldridge as maybe one type of music that you might prefer a little bit more ear gain on. What would you say is sort of your go-to genre pairings with this kind of headphone?
I think it's quite genre agnostic, because the overall tuning, it being slightly more relaxed but still punchy, timbre just generally being correct, and it not having any major points of aggression or anything like that, means that it will just work pretty well with everything. The stuff that I think it really shines on is stuff where the punchiness can come out. So something a little bit more electronic, a little bit more percussion heavy. The new GoldenSound album, Koan, Color Dance in particular, that song sounds fantastic on these headphones. Go and listen to that. I'll put a link to it in the description. Yeah, there's nothing I've listened to which sounds bad on this. It's just that so many headphones, either if they are planars, they usually have something akin to a completely flat bass response, or completely flat and then sometimes a bit of a roll off towards the sub bass. Dynamic driver headphones, even if they have an elevated bass profile, it feels like it's either an HD 800, HD 600 style thing where the sub bass rolls off, or it's a ZMF style thing where it's still elevated but it bleeds into the mid bass quite a bit. This is one of the just straight up best bass profiles I've heard on a headphone generally, I think. The way that it just tracks that HRTFE response with an ever so slight elevation on my head anyway. Just really, really works in terms of how I like bass to sound, and I don't feel the need to EQ it, which is something that is very uncommon. I can just plonk it on my head and it just sounds great.
I was going to say you were comparing it to the Susvara earlier. For me, I'd almost kind of go the opposite and say that out of the box, I prefer the sound of the AR9000, whereas with the Susvara, it's like because the treble works so well on my head with the Susvara, it's like what I do for that headphone is basically just add a bass shelf, and I'm a happy boy, right? Because it already has the bass, not bass shelf, like a bass boost, right? With this one, because it has a bass boost already, it's like it to the level that I want. So like in a way, out of the box, the AR9000 is the preferable one to me. But we should get into some more comparisons. How do you feel about the AR9000 compared to something like the Austrian Audio Composer? Because it's another high-end dynamic driver that has good bass extension.
I think the Austrian Audio Composer out of the box comes across more detailed, and it's got the technicalities in it, mostly because it is brighter. It is just tilted brighter, generally speaking. The bass on this is better. I think just straight up, it's just better. There's certain bits about the Composer that I really appreciate, but I struggle to listen to the Composer without just a treble shelf, just to take things down a bit. It is too bright stock for me, and it does get fatiguing, whereas this does not. I think that I maybe slightly prefer the overall profile of the treble on the Composer. It's just a bit too high, because the ear gain region is a little bit more correct. It's got that 2 kilohertz kind of scoop, which I quite like on headphones, whereas this one, it's got a 2 to sort of 6 kilohertz scoop, so it's just taken out a little bit more. So I prefer the bass on this. I prefer the treble profile on the Composer, but it is too high and I just need to take it down, whereas this, it's not as technically impressive, but I don't need to do anything with it in order to listen to it comfortably. That is a tough one. I like them to very similar degrees, but I have to do a lot less to get this making me smile, so I'd probably have to give the win to this one.
What about compared to the HD800S?
I think this just straight up beats the HD800S, to be honest. There is something about the HD800S which I always come back to for lighter classical music. It's kind of ethereal presentation and slightly more in-your-face detail. The brighter sort of mid and upper treble just really makes those kind of genres work well. But for pretty much everything, I prefer listening on this. This is just a better sounding headphone. Again, out of the box, I don't think it has the in-your-face detail to the same degree, but it's not because of anything outside of frequency response. It's just the ear gain is a bit lower, and I can bump it up if I want to. But I also should probably note, because I've mentioned it several times, and I'd like to clarify that the timbral correctness of this overall, and the fact that the overall balance is so good, is so much more of an advantage than something appearing more technical but then still being fatiguing or not having as good timbre or not just having bass. This is just a much more correct sounding headphone, which you can then get to sound more detailed by just putting one EQ band on it, basically.
It's funny because what you just said is it hits home, because it's like there are on a lot of those other headphones that have more, let's say, esoteric treble, or they might be more attention grabbing for whatever part of the response. They might sound great for a handful of recordings, but the more varied stuff that you listen to, the more the flaws start to show, and you start to think, well, these are just bad recordings. I should stop listening to those. But in reality, it's a large part of that is because the headphone is just not nearly as versatile. And that's why for me, the AR9000 just came down to that versatility where I can put anything through this headphone and it sounds incredible.
Yeah, exactly. It leans a little bit more towards the forgiving side without at all going too far. Whereas something like, I like my 1266. That's probably my most fun headphone, but it's stupid. It's not neutral or correct in any sense of the word. It just makes electronic and EDM music sound dumb and great. But then you put anything with vocals in it and it's wrong. It's just, you can't make that headphone sound timbrally correct. I don't think that's really what it's for. The HD800S, you can EQ to get a lot closer to correct and where I would want it to be. Whereas this, it's so much closer out of the box. And the stuff that I'm nitpicking about are absolutely nitpicks. It's not stuff that I feel I need to change. I've mostly been listening to this with no EQ. And that's something quite special, because there's really just not many headphones where that is the case for me. I almost always have at least one or two things that are stand out enough that I have to get rid of them. I mean, the Aria Unveiled is probably another good example where so much about that headphone works so well for me. I mean, the timbre on it and stuff is fantastic. It's a super technical sounding headphone. It's a super stagey sounding headphone for me. And the overall response, even on my head, is broadly correct. But it's got a really big 5 kilohertz area lift, which I have to get rid of. The HD100S, it needs more sub bass. I have to add that back in or it just does not work. The Susvara, I'm kind of very similar to you, where the overall treble profile on that, which just works great for me. I prefer the overall treble on the Susvara to this, but I do need bass, and I do have to add a little bit of that to that and most other planars that I listen to. Whereas this, it's got the bass, it's got the timbre stuff right, it's got enough detail, and if I just want to correct things that final couple percent, it's really easy to do. But just out of the box, this is a standout and very impressive headphone, and one that does not leave me feeling like, oh, I need to fix something before I can actually enjoy listening to it.
If you had to give it a rating out of 10,
I'm going to go 7.5, maybe. I don't want to give it an 8 because I don't think it's that close yet. If it had the ear gain region just a little bit more filled in, honestly, I would probably be giving this an 8. Everything else about it, though, the bass is a solid 8, maybe even 9. The mid-range, I would give a kind of 6, 7, because that 1 kilohertz is just a little bit boosted. But yeah, the mid-range I would give maybe a 6.5, because it's just that 1 kilohertz bit being just a touch too high. And actually, once I EQ the ear gain region back up to where I like it to be, it's less of a problem. It's more just that actually it's more evident because the ear gain region is also lower. The upper treble, aside from the 6 kilohertz bit that I get on most headphones anyway, so I don't think that's really the headphone's fault, because I only get it on one side as well. My left ear is totally fine. That's kind of the only real gripe I have with it. Everything else just works really well. So I'd probably give this a 7 out of 10, I think, which on my ranking list is one of the highest. I can't remember how many headphones I've actually given an 8 to, but there's not many.
That aligns exactly with mine as well. Like I also gave it, I think, a 7, which is right up there with Utopia and Susvara for me. And this is, again, stock sound, no EQ, right? I think what people coming at this without the context might not realize is that, you know, the 10 out of 10s is like when we've done the personalizations to our DFH RTFs with our preference tilts, right? And nothing compares to that, right?
No, our ranking lists are not like, oh, this, 10 being the best headphone you can currently get. It's we've heard how good things can potentially be. Once you EQ any headphone, including this, to your personal HRTF, it makes every headphone, HE1, Aperio GSE, or whatever, sound kind of disappointing in comparison, because there is only so much you can do with a one-size-fits-all approach. Personalization is kind of the end game. But some headphones just get a lot closer to that than others, and this is one of them.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, like, for the out of the box stock sound being, as good as it is with this, right? It's out of the headphones that currently exist, this is one of the best ones for me right now.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And I think the reason why it's so comfortable to recommend as well is that, again, the bits that I would change or that are not perfect for me aren't things that are standing out as bothersome. Like if a headphone has a big peak or something, I know that is really going to be a problem for a lot of people and I won't be able to recommend it to them. Whereas if something like this is the ear gain's a bit low and so it's just a bit relaxed at times, that's not really something which I think is going to stop someone from enjoying this. It's one of those situations where something having too much of something is going to be much more of a problem than not quite enough of something. And so this is something which, unless you are a very bright headphone enjoyer, this is an easy recommendation. There's one thing which I'm going to ask, because I don't have one here, even though I'm a bit jealous that you do, and I'm sure a lot of other people are going to ask. How do you feel this compares to the AR3000?
So that is the question, right? The AR3000 is not released yet. We don't know when it's going to be released. They had just started teasing it at the trade show at Vienna not that long ago. So I'm not sure. I mean, that's really the question. I'll put it this way. The AR9000 coming out and being as good as it is makes me optimistic for the AR3000, but I don't want to give people sort of false enthusiasm just because we don't know what the production units are actually going to be like, the same way that this production unit is slightly different from what we heard at the Vienna trade shows, right? Or at the various trade shows. So my message there to anybody who's curious about the AR3000 is be patient, wait and see. I'm in the same boat as you guys are because I also have to be patient, and I don't want to make any kind of comment. I don't want to comment really at all on non-production, pre-production, prototype units. So we'll wait.
Well, hopefully that was interesting and useful. But if you've got any questions that you wanted to ask me, Resolve, or anyone else on the team about the AR9000, the AR3000, DACs, amps, headphones, music gear, anything else at all, come and say hey on the Headphones.com Discord server or the Headphones.com forum, where we and other wiggly air enthusiasts will endeavor to help. Till next time, I'm GoldenSound, that was Resolve. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.